Today, we're going to be talking about simplifying the work. Just What Works is something that was designed by Jason Rinker, and it's something that I wish that I had and a tool that I had when I first started working out with all of our youth.
Just what works. We keep it calm, keep it cool. Keep it first. Kids feel safe, staff stay strong on the turf.
So today, Jason, Just What Works.
Just What Works.
How did you come up with this and some of the inspirations behind it?
Well, for anybody who's spoken to me or heard me speak, I'm sure spoken about how much I read and research, and really it's a blend of stuff that's out there already and my lived experiences in residential, working alongside the kids, much like you. And, you know, it's probably born more out of failure and reflection than it is out of successes. But through those failures, you kind of just get back to it. You keep at it and find what works, and then you just kind of do more of that. I think, if anything, it's learned from looking at because we primarily worked with youth, looking at the kids and their resilience, and knowing that if they've been through 10 times, 100 times what I've been through, and they still got the gumption to keep going for it, who am I to give up?
Right.
And so learning as much from my own experiences as I am from them and the example that they sometimes set for us.
Do you remember the first complexity, or the first time you saw something and thought, there just has to be another way? Like, what's one thing that pops in? Because I know that's the first thing, is trying to uncomplicate it, because the systems can be complicated.
Yeah. I think, one of the biggest sort of moments that helped me figure that out was in moving from kind of traditional group home care to a temporary shelter care facility, where in group homes, we often had the kids sometimes for years, sometimes for multiple years, 5-6 years or more. And in moving to a temporary shelter care facility, we had them for 30 days. And so I had to figure out, for their success, for my and my coworkers' abilities to stay in the field, we had to kind of redefine what success looked like. Because if you got multiple years with a kid, the level of growth and change you might see is on a different scale than what you can expect for 30 days. And so we had to really kind of strip down the program, strip down our processes, because we had 30 days with these kids.
Yeah.
And so what did we want to get done? What could we get done? And what did we need to get rid of in order to make success a possibility? Because they deserve that from us. And again, for the sustainability of us as, workers in the field, we had to redefine, like I said, what success really meant for us and for the kids.
Because it's a totally different conversation when you're going down to 30 days. You have different, the goals are almost completely different. Well, not completely different, but it almost gets right into, and I love this question that probably one of the first ones I heard was, what's the most responsible thing you can do at this very moment?
Yeah.
And it's powerful, because if you're even lost in this, I heard this in probation, they say you're lost in the sauce, meaning you just don't quite know what to do. You have a level of consciousness, and, you can make a responsible decision about whatever's going on right there. If you could talk a little bit about that, because getting our kiddos to understand that there's only 30 days and it's a different plan now, and also staff, because now we've got a different expectation. We have to be realistic within those 30 days on what we can get accomplished. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you address both with the kids and the staff?
Yeah, and I think, the uncomplicate sort of principle, so to say, component of the process helps with that, right? We can't expect to see the sort of sustained behavioral change that you could if you've got years with them, because sometimes the behavioral change and sticking with a new habit takes time.
Yeah.
Particularly when they're young. And with the shelter, they were 6 to 12. So their ability to even take on new behavioral patterns is somewhat diminished, right? They're in a learning stage, but they're also quite a bit more driven by their impulses than when maybe they're a teenager and they're trying to intentionally change something up. We didn't have the time for that. So again, having to redefine success, we were forced to, but also able to separate ourselves from looking at the problems as things we had to solve, and instead look at what we wanted these kids to get out of those 30 days. So it was almost a forced change from a problem-focused perspective to a solution-focused perspective. And I think, again, that was one of the most important things that could have happened for me in that kind of finding the just what works process, is realizing if all these kids leave with from that 30 days is the understanding that relationships don't always have to hurt, and that maybe if they're going to a different environment that won't be as calm or won't be as comforting or won't be as connecting, they at least know that it's possible and what it feels like, and that they're going to seek out more of those types of relationships, those styles of relationships, than maybe what they knew before.
Right.
And so it became less about trying to solve their problem behaviors or their problematic, their challenging behaviors, and more about what do we want them to experience. And so I think that shift was really important for in redefining success and enabling success for that program.
Right. I just think about the day-to-day schedule of any, whether it's a temporary shelter or an STRTP facility. The youth still have a bunch of commitments that they have on their plate. Some of them have sometimes some type of drug treatment program that they're doing, some community, got a total brain fart right there.
Yeah.
Maybe they've got
community engagements.
Community engagement stuff.
Sometimes, especially with the temporary shelter care facility, this would be the first time that they were in the system, or they're struggling to get their needs met effectively within the system. So we had doctor's appointments. We had one youth who there were questions about whether or not he had a heart condition. And so, we needed to prioritize getting those specialist doctor appointments done right away.
Right.
Because if he did have, and, I guess gratefully he didn't, but if he did have some sort of heart condition, that could change the type of placement that he would be placed in going forward. And so because the temporary shelter care facility was essentially in some ways kind of like an ER and a bit of a triage and a diagnosis stop point, we really needed to kind of figure out what these kids needed in order to make sure that their needs were most effectively met wherever they would go from there. And some of the work that we did determined where they went from there.
How was the adjustment for staff? Because I know a lot of times we can get into our routines and certain ways that we do things, and it's Thursday. These are certain days I do this. With it being temporary shelter, I'm very curious about that, because most of the facilities are so used to running the program a certain way, even years on end. It's the same thing. Can you talk a little bit about how you were able to help staff see what the end result, what the changes that they're working on for that kiddo or the whole facility?
Yeah, I mean, I think to some extent, it. There's a saying, the necessity is the mother of invention.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for us, as you're talking about like structure, having to rely on our team to get really good at doing the work because we couldn't rely on the kids starting to pick up the work, right? Because in 30 days, once they start to pick it up, might be time for them to move along.
Right.
And so, I think in a lot of ways, we had to restructure a lot of what we understood to be our success. And so, again, it was not about the kids changing so much as it was about us showing up not the same way, but with the same objectives and just sticking with it, right? Because you're going to get your group dynamics were constantly changing. That was one of the challenges of the 30-day shelter. As you know, with, working in the field. And if anybody's been on, a team, a sports team, perhaps, the gelling as a team is so important.
Yeah.
And so we got really good at getting the kids and the new kids and the new kids to always kind of gel because we got really good at running the program as a team.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much, because again, the priority of longer term care is to get the kids to be able to run the program more themselves. But we got really good at kind of picking our priorities, and it was less about getting the kids to know the schedule themselves and adopt it. That sometimes happened depending on whether or not the kids were ready for that part of their sort of treatment. But we got really good at recognizing what we could control and what we couldn't. Is we could be good at the schedule and make sure that the kids knew what the schedule was, and got good at helping them learn the schedule and accommodate to the schedule. But that essentially, again, once we got there, that was kind of where, just because of time-wise, our work would often stop.
That's interesting because, you learn about front-loading very early on and how important it is. And it's just a funny thing that reminded me. My dad would never front-load. Keep your eyes and ears open and you might learn something, David. Cracked me up the whole time. But that leads into the unnecessary processes and how costly they are. Yep. When you're making a huge program change, whether you're going up to STRTP or you're doing as a temporary shelter, there's some processes that are going to stick out. And how do you decide which ones you're going to keep, which ones are important, which ones you're going to alter? Yep. And you said prioritize. Well, give me an example of how you guys are doing that.
Sure. So, again, with 30 days, and we haven't really talked about it in this conversation, this episode, the challenges and barriers that the kids coming into these sorts of programs have when it comes to relationships, right? So, they've been through what, is often called big T trauma or little T trauma, right? Big T trauma is big, life-changing events, and little T trauma is, to for lack of a better term, like challenging events that happen more frequently, right? And oftentimes those big T or little T traumas for these kids comes through family members or, close, family friends, things like that. And so for them, new people and people in general can be particularly scary and even realistically dangerous. And so for us, the easiest thing for us to prioritize was reestablishing that, as I think I said earlier, relationships don't always have to hurt, and they can even be good. Because the challenge for these kids, if we were successful in building those templates of healthy, helpful relationships, was that the work that they would face in, changing behaviors, growing in skills, would all happen in, community environments, family environments. And so what we needed to do was help them be ready to accept that help when they were no longer with us. And that's a challenge, right? Yeah. Because there weren't always the types of supportive relationships that they would get with us available for them when they moved into, back home or to a foster care family or, some other family member within their family. They weren't always either financially able to provide what we would provide or, on board with trauma-informed care or the style of parenting, reparenting, treatment that we would give. And so that could be some of the challenges, right? We had a kid who would refuse school every morning. And we would work with him and he would go to school every morning because the refusal of school was more about his anxiety around school. And so once we were able to, continually address that, he could still attend school. When he was successfully what we would call discharged into a resource family or a foster care placement, as soon as he said, I'm not going to school, that family member, that resource parent, not perhaps knowing how to help him still attend school, even though he was initially refusing, said, well, I've got to go to work. I can't miss work and stay back here with you. So, you've got to go to a different placement. So he returned to us because of, from my perspective, a shortcoming in the training available to those foster care placements, those resource families in working with those youth. And so, maybe that's to kind of model the just solve perspective. Okay, he wasn't ready yet, right? Would I like to work with that resource parent and get them, from my perspective, to a level of skill where they could navigate him through that moment? Yes. But if that's not what's available, okay, I'm not going to accept that as acceptable. We're going to work even harder to get that young man to a place where if there are folks who don't have exactly what he needs, he's still able to overcome and navigate those situations himself, because not everything's going to line up perfectly, and we need him to be ready for that too.
One of the things I was having an aha moment about was the relativeness of change that each type of facility is going to have to make. So STRTP and temporary shelters, the changes that they have to make are just they're relative to what their current programs are doing. It's not like they're going to make some huge change to their program. And that's something that I was really like, oh my gosh. It's almost like the simple answer or something that's like right in front of you, but you miss it because you've got all these different systems and stuff going on. Can you speak to, the different changes that, and it's relative.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what it kind of boils down to is it's a shift from looking at the, from problem-focused, thinking to solution-focused thinking, right? Changing your perspective on what the work is. It's less about addressing every problematic or challenging behavior that we see from the youth and more about how do we build with them the relationships that help them regulate and supply them with the tools and the supports and the collaboration, the teamwork to help them solve their problems more effectively. The challenging behaviors go away when they've got a better solution and they can sustainably implement that solution. I think, if someone makes rude jokes as a way of, building relationships or seeming cool in front of their peers, if you give them a better tool to build those relationships without the kind of relational impacts of uncomfortable or kind of over the line jokes, they'll use the thing that works best for them. That's the challenge right now with their challenging behaviors is those challenging behaviors are the best tools they've got. And so you're right that temporary shelter care facilities and STRTPs, the solutions are all along the same path. It's just that they're going to look different for every kid too, right? The outcomes you're looking to get from a temporary shelter care facility are still going to be found through relationship and support, just the same way that they are with STRTP. But the things that change are the level of behaviors that you might see with STRTP, but also the amount of time that you've got to work on those or work alongside those kids in addressing those things.
Right. You mentioned something, and I think it's key for anybody that's either, whether you've been in the business in this industry for a long time or you're just getting started, but especially ones that are just getting started. You said that maybe they're not ready for the relationship. I've never heard it put that way. But to wrap your head around it and understanding their behaviors with you, that's everything, because the relationship is key. And a lot of times we'll try to personalize sometimes why something may not be happening or why it's happening a certain way. Can you talk a little bit about that, about them not being ready for the relationship?
Yeah. So there was a training that I would used to do for a different organization where we would go over boundaries, and I would put out, agility cones, which are, short little cones. You can see like, football or soccer folks drilling with them. And we would just drop them down to signify if somebody was physically too far from you to have a relationship, just right, or too close. And, we would talk about that having emotional sort of dimensions as well. We can see it and feel it a little bit more clearly in the physical realm, but that emotionally, relationally, that same sort of example transfers. And so when you begin to have a relationship with someone who's untrusting of you or just people in general, they're too close is going to be way far out there, right? Because if they don't know that you're safe, they're going to need you much further away from them in order to feel safe than if you've got an established relationship with them, right? If you've worked with somebody for 10 years, they can bump into you or they can maybe, depending on the workplace, give you a hug, and that's not out of the ordinary. It doesn't cross boundaries. It doesn't make you feel uncomfortable. Versus if you meet somebody for the first time and they try and go and hug you, depending on your relationship style, depending on the setting, right? That might be weird. Yeah. Right?
Very awkward might be.
And so, especially for our kids who, as I said earlier, the big T or small T traumas, the damage, the absence of autonomy that they experience in those trauma, we have to allow them to set the relationship distance outside of moments of us needing to assert safety. We have to let them decide how close is too close, or else they're beginning to re-experience their relationship with us as unsafe in similar ways that they experienced past relationships as being unsafe, because those people didn't allow them to set boundaries, and we might not be either. So it's a bit of a dance, especially at the beginning, for us to prove that we are safe in ways that they and their body can read, so that we can be there in ways that helps to actually bring calm to their body, right? They need to experience proximity, closeness to us as bringing safety, not bringing danger. Yeah. And so that, I think, was one of the things that I really had to learn, was the first sort of hurdle to get over in the temporary shelter care facility, because you didn't have the time to let that develop. If that's the primary outcome, you really had to cut out all the other stuff that we often added into residential, because that was the sole, for us, measure of success. Does this kid know how to navigate relationships in order for them to feel safe, so that they can replicate that with whoever they're with next?
It's a trip when you're talking about navigating the relationship, because that's a continuous thing, and it's a skill that they're going to be taking on with them. And when you're able to sit down and you see them finally understand that that's what it is, what's the pushback like from both the kiddos and the staff? Because sometimes you have some staff that are like, they don't like to get too close. They like to keep them at a distance, but we're still it's a fine line, and it's something you've got to navigate. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think what we would tell the staff, and to a lesser extent, because I would train the staff, also tell the kids though, is it's okay for people to have different styles of relationship and different boundaries, and that regardless of the differences, it's important to respect them. There were at one of the agencies that I worked at, hugs were fine, right? Mm-hmm. Side hugs particularly, but that sort of physical proximity and affection was, I believe, correctly understood to, in the right context, be healing. It's normal to want and to need that sort of physical touch to regulate, right? My own kids, hugs do a lot, right? When someone's upset. And while I understand and respect agencies that for purposes of safety for both the staff and the kids, kind of set boundaries a little bit differently, what we would say for the staff that weren't, physically affectionate to the kids, if that was their boundary, that's okay, right? If some of the kids didn't want to hug, that's okay. I would always emphasize with the staff, even if you've got a kid who you've hugged before, try not to make the assumption that it's okay, and always ask them for permission, because we want them to understand no one gets free access to your body. And if it's okay for you one day and not okay the next, that's okay. And that anybody who shames you for setting those boundaries, right? Yeah. That doesn't mean that they're, not okay for you to set. It means that maybe you should reevaluate your relationship with them and how safe they make you feel, right? So it's okay for us to have different boundaries. It's okay for us, as staff, to look at those things differently, because we need our kids to be able to navigate different styles of relationships, and for the kids to be able to set those boundaries too. And it's okay for them to see staff set boundaries differently, because they should know that they don't have to always hug. They don't have to hug at all. Everybody's got different boundaries, and for them, in their future relationships, need to learn how to navigate when other people set boundaries for them too.
That's an eye-opener, because a lot of them tend to have a certain style of the way that they present themselves and the way they introduce themselves. So that's a lot to learn. I want to make a little bit of a segue into the framework of Just What Works. In this series that we're going to be doing, we're going to be covering each section. If you could just either go through each letter of the acronym and define it, and we'll go from there. Sure.
So the first sort of component, the first sort of grouping is the just approach. The approach in this context is how you look at the work, how you understand the work, how you interpret what you are seeing, and how you respond to it. Yeah. And so the first, part of that is just solve. That essentially means, take the steps to make real the future that we want to see. It's a recognition that things won't get better unless we're working to get them there. And I want to be clear with the word work, because sometimes the action that needs to be taken is to watch, to observe, right? We don't always need to force everything. Yeah. As I was kind of saying, it's okay for, the work sometimes is respecting the boundary. If a kid isn't ready, pushing for them to be ready is not the way to get them there.
You learn that real quick.
And even if they accept it, it's at their own cost. It's at, my boundaries don't matter, right? And we want them to be able to say, I'm not okay with that at all or yet. And outside of safety issues, right? Because safety isn't negotiable. Everything else kind of is, So just solve is about taking the actions or doing the work, whatever that may be, to bring about that future that we want. Uncomplicate is next. And that's about like boiling it down to the minimum viable product, so to say, the minimal viable objectives. And it really, for me, boils down to, for residential work, relationship and support. And that it's okay for that to be a moving target, right? When kids are growing up, the way that you help them cross the street when they're young versus when they're older is going to be different.
Yeah.
And so the thing they need to learn when they're learning about the danger of the street versus the importance of them exercising, looking both ways, that's different.
Yeah.
The level of support that you give is different. When they're young, it's holding their hand to make sure they don't impulsively run across. When they're older, it may be reminding them as they're walking across without holding their hand, what are they supposed to do?
Yeah.
Or then praising them for looking both ways without the prompt. The support changes with them. And, that kind of moves us on to share.
Mm-hmm.
If you're with your significant other, your spouse, with your team members, changing the support or establishing what the relationship looks like, making sure that your team member, your spouse, your significant other, your co-parent, they're on the same page, because you want to be providing them with the support that works. And ultimately, when the kid's ready, bring them in to be the most important member of that team.
Right.
Because, letting them know there's going to be times where I'm not there and you still need to cross the street safely.
Yeah.
I need you to prioritize your safety as much as I am. I need you to practice this with, the recognition that eventually I'm not going to be there, and you're going to have to hold this priority and remember the tasks that you need to kind of accomplish safely. For example, again, cross the street.
Right. Even just that example, it's very interesting, because you'll see that transition of understanding they actually have a responsibility. Some of them shy away from it and they don't want it. And no, I want you to make it for me. And then you have some that do embrace it. And there's middle of the road where they can't make a decision.
Yep.
And the responsibility part is interesting to watch all of them assume it. And also the consequences, positive and negative, that come along with it. And either one are fine. We're the most responsible choice at that time, which is really cool. The whole, the share and the team are two of the ones that are probably my favorite from the just part, especially the share part, because they get to see the team, that it's not just you. Clinical's got their job to do. Line staff, you're going to have management. Everybody's got a part in the success of all those kiddos that are underneath the roof.
Yep.
In regards to team, hold on. Total blank one right there.
You're good. I do have, one of the things that I love about working with a team, particularly in treatment, is the idea that if we're effectively sharing and building, like, it sounds a little bit mechanical, but like equivalent relationships. If the level of regulation that my presence brings is equal to the level of regulation that your presence brings, we as a team make sure that their treatment never stops.
Yes.
Because we're all on the same page. We're all doing the same thing. We're all supporting in maybe similar ways. Everybody does things differently, and that's okay. But that we're all there with the same objectives and the same style of teamwork that brings the kid in and makes them part of the team too. And, if what these kids learn in their time with us is that they can be an important and maybe the most important member of a team, and what it feels like and what it looks like to work on a regulated, collaborative, solution-focused or solution-finding team.
Yeah.
We've given them such a gift, right?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to work in any other environment. And if that's the team environment that we're creating and the kids get to just sit in that and learn from it and be a part of it. Yeah.
Well, they say more is caught than taught, because they're watching how staff interact with each other. They
know all the cheese.
They've got all the cheese.
Right.
That's a whole nother episode.
Yeah, that's a whole nother episode. But I think like that brings them in a whole different kind of way. And something you were saying earlier is like made me think of the what dialogues, which is the next component. And the what dialogues, the approach is how we look at the work. The what dialogues is essentially like how we start to do the work. It's how we surface the things that we're already doing that are effective and where we kind of want to go. And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but the 4 what dialogues stand for what works, right? When you were talking earlier about, the crossing the street and the kid saying, "Oh, I like when you do that." That is the what works, right? You can ask the kid, what's helpful that I do that reminds you how you're supposed to cross the street, to use that example. In our work, it might sound like when you're successful getting up in the morning, what are you doing the night before? What are we doing the night before? What are we doing the night of? Helping them identify, oh, well, an alarm clock helped, or 2 reminders, or turning the lights on, or whatever it might be. And it doesn't have to be the same thing for everybody. That can be individualized. And it helps them identify the things that when they're on their own, they may want to recreate for themselves.
Right.
The next question is, how would that look, right? If you woke up tomorrow, for the clinicians in the field, you're going to hear me basically taking the solution-focused questions. But how would that look is similar to the miracle question. If you woke up tomorrow and, you were being discharged from our program that day because you were being successful in every way that you wanted to be, what would that look like? What would you be doing? How would, what would we as staff notice about you? What would others notice about you? How would you be carrying yourself? What would you be preparing to do when you discharged, right? Where would you be going? Helping them picture success so much closer than sometimes we make it seem. And then asking them, and so then we what? Like what's next? If that's the perfect 10, where are we now? And what would being 1 number closer look like? And
that's a great transition. It's so easy. It sounds like it on paper, but it is in real time as well.
It's okay. So if what works is that alarm clock, and you'd be waking up the first, time the alarm goes off and not snoozing it a bunch of times. Okay, well, do we have that alarm clock? How many times do you snooze now? Okay, would, snoozing it 3 times as opposed to 4 times make it 1 number closer? Would you, be 5 minutes early to school or your ride, or what would, helping them again, make that success so much more tangible, so much closer, and then figuring it out. It's not about project managing. It's about helping them realize success isn't that far off, and that they might have already found moments of success that they can replicate again or kind of reach for again. And then ultimately, tell me why this matters. Why is it so important for you to undertake this work and keep at it when the times get tough? And having the knowledge for us as staff of what internally motivates them, I think is so important, because we don't have to enforce discipline, right? We help them rely on their own self-discipline, on their own self-motivation. And it for me fundamentally shifts the relationship into one of collaboration as opposed to coercion, or one of trying to attain compliance. And it allows the relationship and the boundaries to be such that we bring regulation to them more easily, because it's not of, oh man, what is David going to tell me that I screwed up today?
Yeah.
Versus when I go to David, he points out that the solutions aren't that far off, and I may have already been able to achieve them before.
Right.
And I walk away with next steps and a reminder as to why I'm going to keep at this again.
Yeah.
Because it's that important. Because the goals that I want to achieve are more important than, focusing on the screw up of today.
Yeah. I was going to say that the incremental growth by just doing what works, it builds a solid foundation, because you could have a kiddo that's got, again, I go back to the drug treatment program, because most of the kiddos, if they have that, they have to go almost directly after school. And it's a long day.
Yeah.
I mean, most of us get home and it's, but they've got to go to drug treatment. But the incremental growth, I think what it does is it builds a really solid foundation. So the kiddo can actually see where he's been making the progress. Like you said, maybe it's they went from 3 snoozes to 2. Okay, well, maybe this time they didn't have to stop home and they went directly from school because staff made them a quick little lunch and a snack. So they didn't have to do that. So a lot of little wins that they can see, and then really either it's charted or they themselves know what they've been doing. And that's one of the things I like about the incremental growth of this, is that it lays a solid foundation for both the staff and the kids, for everybody to look back and remind them, hey, you're on pace.
Yep.
Which is not usually the case. It's they had a bad day, they don't want to go today, and now they start back again. And it's so easy to fall back on bad habits if you're not focused on all the right things.
Yeah. And I know what y'all might be thinking, that how do you address, shortcomings of behavior? That again is why tell me why this matters is so important, because it's them telling us why the goals that they want to achieve are so important to them. And so the conversation, when they're regulated, can sound something like, hey, David, I know when we talked about, when you came here, on the first day and we did intake, and I asked you, when you discharge from this program successfully, what does that mean you're going to be doing? And we went through all that, and you said, I'm going to be doing my whole program so that when I get home, right, that I don't have to feel like they wonder when I'm going to screw up, because, it's not about me screwing up anymore. It's about me achieving my goals of owning my own business.
Right.
And so that's what I'm pursuing. And it's not about just not screwing up. It's about something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
I know yesterday maybe didn't turn out the way you wanted. Are there any of the things that, you did yesterday that brought you closer to owning your own business? And are there any things that maybe didn't? And we can talk about how we do more of the things that did and maybe less of the things that didn't. Debrief, right? That, I think, is a much more successful, much more, relational way to help them understand they're building a future or they're not.
Yeah.
Right? One they want or one they don't. And so to bring it back to your example about drug treatment and to move into the works supports, this isn't the solution. It's the way that we support the solution. If the solution is David running his own business, and part of that is going to drug treatment, the work together right? That's the W of the work. I thought of the exact same thing, right? I was thinking, you pick them up from school, you've got a Ziploc bag that maybe you packed or they packed the night before, and it's got snacks, it's got, PB&J, which would be my go-to. Maybe it's got an orange or something. Like, they've got all the stuff they need to make it through, that drug treatment program without missing their 3:00 snack.
Right.
Or if lunch was not good at school today, this holds them over.
Right.
Or if, they going to drug treatment makes them think about using something, like an orange that is very tangible, right? They're peeling it, they're smelling it, they're eating it, helping with having all that stuff, that's how we work together best, right? The next component of the works supports is only what adds, right? With the just approach, we want to uncomplicate. And sometimes the way we do that is by going through all of the things that we're doing and pulling out everything that doesn't add, right? Clarity or value.
It's like pruning a bush.
It's like pruning a bush.
Yeah.
And I love that example because the actuality of why we prune is sometimes there are branches or parts that are growing that they're really not adding that much value.
Yeah.
And so by removing them, all the nutrients, all the support, all the energy goes to the thing that is going to be providing the most fruit.
Yeah.
And it's okay for us to help the kids kind of in that debrief. It's a little bit of a pruning process, right? It's like,
definitely.
well, of the things that you're doing, what gives you the most likely outcome of owning your own business?
Yeah. And that's a great question when you narrow it down like that, and the conversations that you can have. Let's just say the kiddo's 17. He's got a full year with you, and hopefully, he's moving in the right direction. It gives them a lot of clarity, and it puts the blinders on for what they can focus on, because it's a great time in their lives right there to be able to, you know what? Here we go. I'm about to turn 18.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
Well, I mean, to use the example of, running your business, you might even, if your youth that's their goal, you might even have them start running a business while they're there and help them, realize what works. That's the next component of the works supports. If, they're sending out mailers, right? And they send out 2 different versions. Then the little tweaks in either one. What's working? Tracking.
Yeah.
If, in orange helps them ground versus if an apple helps them ground, right? In terms of, substance use, cravings management, helping them recognize the things that are actually working for them. And sometimes we're going to have to take the responsibility of kind of holding that debrief for them. They may not slow down enough for themselves and intentionally enough to recognize, hey, today what worked, right? Today you did this well.
Yeah.
Hey, you got really pissed off at so-and-so, and maybe righteously so, but you didn't put your hands on him. What helped you do that today? Because previously, when he said that same thing, you put your hands on him.
Yeah.
So today you didn't. Great job. But what helped you do that? Because I want to make sure we support that.
What I like about what you just did right there, that debrief takes less than 2 minutes.
Yep.
And it's powerful because it recenters the kiddo and probably the staff sometimes, because we can get triggered based on their behaviors as well.
I think maybe one of the reasons why it doesn't take so long is it's not the crap sandwich.
Yeah.
That, right? Because sometimes the crap sandwich, if you haven't heard that phrase before, it's positive, then maybe negative, then positive. And I think you have to use the structure that way with the crap sandwich, because you're trying to soften the blow of the not so nice delivered in between.
Right.
And I think when we're again asking them to do their own analysis of what is getting them closer to their goals, and if there's anything that isn't, how can we help you do less of those things? It's not us delivering anything, honestly. It's us facilitating their own understanding, and importantly so, them practicing the process of doing that for themselves.
I like that, because with them practicing the process, they're also learning that, oh, well, I'm not a druggie. That was something I did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whatever behaviors it may be, they're learning to go, well, that doesn't help me at all.
I reached for that to regulate when the certain life circumstance happened, right? I was stressed about a test, so I smoked some weed before I took the test.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, did you get in trouble at school? Did it make your grade better? Like, let's figure it out.
Right.
Let's see what of that worked for you. Did it help you feel better? Yeah, in the moment.
Yeah.
Did it maybe impact your testing? Did it impact you? Did you smell like weed and the school resource officer called you out and whatever happened, or cost you money, or is it a better way to regulate that doesn't cost you money? Whatever it may be, we can help them figure that out in relationship to their goals. And if that's a discouraging conversation, move on to the next part of the work supports. Keep at it, right? I was listening to a book yesterday, actually, and they were talking about, Edison, and that he employed a bunch of, I'm going to forget the term, I think he might have called them muckers. And he would basically have a bunch of people just iterate how to make the light bulb work better. So he had employed basically a workshop of people trying a bunch of things out.
Yeah.
Until they did find the thing that worked, right? And that's what invention is. That's what finding a solution is. It's keeping at it long enough through all the iterations, through all the failures, through all the struggles, until you find the thing that works best. And then you just do that.
Right.
Right. There's again a turn of phrase, a saying, you don't fail until you give up. Right? Everything before that is learn.
Right.
Everything before that is learning.
Right.
And for our kids, I think, again, that's one of the most important things that they can learn is the importance of resilience.
Right.
They've had to be resilient through some really difficult things. And sometimes that resilience can be fragile because they measure their self-worth with their initial success or initial failure. And if we can help them recalibrate that to recognize the strength that they've shown in enduring through the things that they've been through, and that same resilience is going to be the thing that powers them forward towards success. Yeah. I think that's the thing that I've learned so much from them. Right.
The thing that I just crack up on the things that we learn just as human beings, either through osmosis because you're around, you heard something. Anybody that we're working with this process is learning the process indirectly. They don't even know it. Yeah. So when a kiddo's hearing something about only what adds value, a lot of times they don't even understand what value means, and they're learning it for the very first time. And they're like, well, that helped me. Yeah, that adds value. I like that. I like that value thing. Like they'll talk just like that. So it's really, to me, to watch some of the aha moments that the kids are also having and the staff are watching them have it. That's one of the things I think most of the staff, if you haven't had that experience yet where a kid looks at you with those eyes like that, you wait.
Yeah.
You wait.
Yeah.
What else did you... I think
we got one more. We got one more, and so this is the final part of the works supports, and it's the shared why, distributed how. And I think this is the ultimate goal of treatment and parenting and training and leadership. And it's, if you all understand the objectives, the goals, and you can contribute to it with your understanding of how, your ideas about how, that's what, in the context of treatment and the work that we do, for me, gives me hope that we can have productive, safe, contributing citizens, right? Members of our community. Is they can give something that I would never come up with, because the thing that I'm here to contribute is different. If we all want everybody to have the freedom and the resources to contribute their best, I can't dictate what that looks like for them. We can agree that that's our common goal, but they've got to figure out what that means they are capable of contributing. Yeah. Right? In our team, right? Right. You, me, Jacob, and Aid, we've all bought in on what it is that we're trying to get done with this grant, right? We're trying to make the work more sustainable. We're trying to, for the staff, we're trying to make the work more effective for the kids that come through all of these placements across the state. We're trying to make law enforcement more capable of responding in ways that help them stay safer in the community and are more effective in working with our particular population. And that's a big, and to reduce the burnout for staff. That's a huge undertaking, right? For a team of 4.
Right.
Right. But it becomes a lot more fun and a lot more attainable when, right, you've got the how of making this come alive through the trainings that we're doing, through the TA that we're doing, through this stuff that we're doing, right? If you all can see this incredible setup, it's one thing on camera, it's another thing to see the behind the scenes, and Jacob contributes all of that because I don't know the first thing about this stuff, right?
I just come in awe,
right? And
I call him the magic man, by the way.
We've got Anaid who knows about production, who's doing all the technical behind the scenes stuff to get these things scheduled and set up.
Right.
And the various things that I do, right? But I think that, that's what makes this experience so wonderful is we all agree on what we're trying to achieve, and we've all got a piece of how we're going to get there. Right. And it's a different piece. And so we're working in unison in some ways and in collaboration in others, right?
Right.
We've got our individual pieces, but they all overlap slightly, but they're all unique in other ways. Right. And so, for that to be the kind of shared objective for our kids as members of the community, because they learned it and they lived it as a team member on their own treatment team, I think to me is one of the coolest parts of what this process is capable of achieving.
Right. And we started out talking about simplifying the work. If we're really doing the Just What Work process as we're doing this, which was initially trying to wrap my head around it, and I go, David, don't complicate it. It's actually, because sometimes we tend to do that. We look at things and think, it can't just be that. No, it is, and it's just exciting as we're getting into these next episodes of the Just What Works podcast and really applying it, I think, towards at the end to some real life situations that actually have happened. Obviously, everybody's going to be anonymous, but we're going to talk about some certain situations and how this Just What Work process applies and how you guys can also use it yourselves. Any parting words, Jason?
Stay tuned for more, right? We've got a lot coming out, and we'll be coming out with some taped versions of our currently available training, so some facilitated versions. And those will be available 24/7, again, in a facilitated version. David will be presenting them. And if you need some help with some of the work that you're doing with your team, with your clients, with the youth in your care, or if you've got some great kind of best practices that you would love to share with us, we'd love to hear about those things that you're struggling with or that you're doing well already, what you're doing that already works. And let's work together.